Can you hear me? Test, test. I can't hear you, Kareem. You want me to try to use my iPad? What happened?
the we now see them doing these endorsements.
It's time for us to be able to become initiatives that's really germane to increasing the quality of life in our communities. And so we have to be able to stand up and be united along those levels. You know, we can have and develop our own super PACs or our own talent base, and we have to build a bench of electable leaders that's going to make the difference in our community, that understands the needs of our families. And so we definitely have to pull the line. You know, we have to be able to establish that, but definitely those that will oppress us and then expect us to be able to support our own demise in many cases, we should not be always wanting to grant that type of benefit to them if they don't recognize what we're trying to do and what our needs are in our local communities.
Okay, so one of the things that I thought was interesting, and I want to bring this back to the conversation because you see this time and time again. My issue is that our community often does not fight hard enough for what are the things that should be a part of an urban or a Black agenda, if we would say it. And so we get promised a ton of things that are supposed to come into the community, and Voting Rights Act, when we said, hey, we got to vote against the lesser two evils, either Joe Biden or Donald Trump. And so we jumped on board, and voting rights issues were going to be some things that were taken up until something else comes along. Voting rights still have not taken place. There are other issues that we experience here on a state level that have not taken place. We see a lot of progress with certain factors within the Democratic Party, but in many ways, I see us being pushed into corners. There are new individuals that are coming into the party that are really receiving the attention, and we're assumed that we can be overlooked. But when it comes time to go into the ballot, we're seen as a solid Democratic voting bloc. What should happen, or what should the Black community do to make sure that their voices are not overlooked and that they are not taken for granted as a solid Democratic voting bloc?
Well, the thing is, we have to unify and then actually put forth an agenda, agenda that's going to be able to increase the quality of life for families of color that's been glossed over. You know, in the Black community, you know, the number one killer of Black men is gun violence. Right?
Absolutely.
We have to really work toward be able to resolve those issues and then have legislative movements to be able to support those initiatives around education or the healthcare disparity. When we have infant mortality ratios in our community that Black and brown babies are dying 4 times more than their white counterparts. Maternal mortality, Black and brown women are dying 3 times more than their white counterparts. When we talk about the racial wealth gap, we have to talk about the entrepreneur and business opportunities and the level of education opportunities in our public system. We have to speak to these agenda items, and we have to be able to look at it and then go with it with a strategic and a tactical way that's going to say we need to support these levels. When I was a state legislator, I was the chairman of the Legislative Black Caucus. I'm now the co-chairman of the Black Mayors of Michigan. But we have to speak to these unique issues, but definitely if they won't let us in the room and just telling us to, because we're Black, they assume, and the assumption automatically becomes that if you're Black, that you're a Democrat and that you're going to vote in that way, not the issues that's going to be able to advance our families and our life. And so we have to really focus and we have to unify around the ideas that's going to be able to continue to support and lift our families. And until we take a hard stand that says, don't take us for granted. Don't ask us to push the bus and don't let us ride. Don't take us to be just an automatic. And Kareem, you and I were, because we're Black, we were born, and the assumption was automatically we were Black, that we're automatically in the Democratic Party. We don't always are given an opportunity of a choice or a movement of saying that we want to initiate a level of movement. And if we're Black in America, we should definitely be engaged in the voting process. We should know the 13th, 14th, and the 15th amendments of the Constitution. On the face of the earth, there's only one group of people, human beings, that has to have a document that says that you're free. And that's in the Constitution of the United States of America, which is the 13th Amendment. And when we think about that, he says, wow, that, we have to have a document that says that we're free. And it's been done by government and government engagement. And so we have definitely the right and the ability to be able to engage in the greatest American right we have, which is the voting right. But definitely we have a responsibility to get there and be educated about what's in front of us, and then to make an open choice and not be told what we should do and how we should be able to do what we need to do with our American right.
Mayor, we saw with the primary, we saw a real strong move by the Dearborn community because they were upset because our president had not put forth a long-term ceasefire in what's happening over in Gaza with Israel and Hamas. And there were 100,000 individuals who voted uncommitted. There's an example of a community who understands we can have legislation, but we've got to have collaboration, right? We have to be able to, as a community, come together and find issues that are very important. But instead of we having 50 different factions that our representatives and state senators and individuals who represent us have to go out and to support, we've got to find a way to understand that collaboration inspires innovation. So we've got to work together to give a solid voice, to stand together in solidarity. Because what I saw happen with those 100,000 votes that took place in that Dearborn community is that they were recognized. We saw Vice President Kamala Harris today after her walk on Edmund Pettus Bridge, which should be about the civil rights that has been long standing for African Americans. She took that time to talk about an immediate ceasefire for the war that's happening with Israel. What do you say about what has transpired with that movement? And how should what should Black people learn from that type of a stance?
Well, Mayor Abdullah Hammoud, which is the mayor of Dearborn, he and I served together in the State House. But definitely they came together with a concerted effort. They focused, they maximized their vote. With a collective push, they were able to push. The White House was now calling for a ceasefire when they were very reluctant in the past not to be able to engage that level of what we've seen today. I think it was because 100,000 or more voters voted uncommitted that made them think about what it is that they were asking for, and I think it helped them to come to a decision to start calling for these things. And I think those same tools can be used in our communities. If the only thing that we require from them is a guarantee of a promise that sometimes is never delivered, we definitely need to galvanize our strength, our force, and our power to be able to say, okay, what's important in our communities? What is the agenda that's been set? Right there, right in your backyard, right there in Saginaw, Amos O'Neill is Representative Amos O'Neill is the vice chair of the Legislative Black Caucus. And he's there as 148 individuals out of a state of 10 million that can do the things that's necessary to change laws and change the trajectory of our communities based upon laws and allocation of dollars. And he's been doing a fantastic job there. I know they have set out their agenda items for what they want to do in moving our issues to put them in place in government. We need to set an agenda. The Black agenda needs to be set. Communities of challenge, we need to set an agenda, and then we need to put the measurement and strength behind those agenda items, and we can see things change, much like what you just talked about with the Vice President Kamala Harris today, and also President Joe Biden recently just calling for a ceasefire in the Gaza Strip.
Okay, I want to ask you a question, and then I'm going to say something just to give you a second to think about it. The question that I want to ask is, you mentioned a Black agenda. I want to give you a second to think about it. What 4 things need to be included in a Black agenda? And while you're thinking about this, I do want to mention I had an opportunity, and this is why we need to understand that representation matters. On last Wednesday, I was asked to speak before the Appropriations Committee as it relates to gun violence and the things that we're doing here in the Saginaw community. And when I was in that meeting, Representative O'Neill, when you say fighting for the city of Saginaw, he literally took to task the entire committee and the fact that so much of our money often goes to the only city in the state of Michigan. I say that as a joke, Detroit, Michigan. And he began to say why Saginaw needed the money. He began to call into question what we would refer to as systemic racism, the things, the processes, and how monies are often given to certain places and other areas are omitted. The process often is the reason why some people don't get what we need. And I was really proud to be one of his citizens from his community, seeing him stand up and fight and to address the concerns and the issues of the city of Saginaw. All right, so Mayor Neely, we're going to go back. What are the 4 things that need to be included if we are truly going to have a Black agenda?
Yeah, we got to talk about the issues of health care and the quality of life for families, especially our young people. What I call our children is true innocence, and it's the promise of tomorrow. Our children are a promise of tomorrow. We have to give them an opportunity to have a good start and a fresh start. We have to improve quality of education in our inner city areas, and also we have to be able to improve the quality of health care and economic growth, and to be able to close the racial wealth gap and to provide opportunities for those families to be able to do so. But health care is very, very important. As I talked about the infant mortality ratio, there's no quality of life if you don't have life. And we look at, it's unimaginable, why are Black and brown babies dying 4 times more than their white counterparts? Why are Black mothers going through the process of giving birth dying 3 times more than their white counterparts? Why are these mass incarceration? If you look at the mass incarceration and the level of Black and brown people are going to jail or being incarcerated, it is definitely a hindrance to our community on multiple levels. And so we talk about excessive sentencing. Michigan rates the worst in the country for excessive sentencing. You get on average 4 years more of a sentence for same like crimes in other states. So we really have to really talk about those things and peel these things, really pull them back. And that's why I commend you about having courageous conversations, but you're going to have people that's going to be willing to talk about these, and then true champions like Representative Amos O'Neill to be able to sit in those spaces and to speak truth to power, even when he may be outnumbered. But we can only be as strong as the army that we represent. So we need people to fold in, to organize, to be able to talk about these things. If you go back 60 years and look at, let's take the Black Panther Party, for instance, right? They had a 10-point program. I would challenge your viewers and your listeners to go back and look at that 10-point program that was developed 60 years ago and see how many of those 10 points are still relevant today. And then we look at, some of the things that we were championing about, quality of life. It's about work and working opportunities. Martin Luther King died on a Poor People's Campaign there in Memphis. When we talk about those and trying to execute getting good quality jobs in our community to be able to close the gap in the racial wealth gap. And so we have a lot of those things. But when we talk about the agenda, you have to have like-minded thinkers sitting around the table, from your educators to your faith-based to your elected leaders, to be able to have these conversations, put the agenda together and lift that agenda, and then everybody pushes equally. That way you don't have you don't have to have the iconic one person leading, where we have the things the causes of divide, the malice, the envy, the jealousy, or the greed. But you lift the Black agenda, or the agenda that's going to increase the quality of life for your families, much like you've seen what happened out of Dearborn. They talked about the issues that were important to them. They organized, they financed it, and they put a vote to it, and they changed the mind of the leaders of America about an issue that was very important to them. We can do that in our communities, but we have to have the focal point to be able to say we are important enough to be able to put our differences aside, to be able to push forward for our families and our children and the promise of our tomorrow.
I appreciate that answer so much, and it leads me to this next question. What should we say to inspire? I'm not even going to say inspire young Black folks. I'm going to say, what would you say to inspire Kareem to vote in a national election? I understand the importance of voting in my local elections for my city council, mayor, those types of things, our state officials, our state reps, because those are the ones that make the greatest impact on our local community. But what would you say to somebody like myself? I believe in voting. I believe in the power of the vote. I am going to vote. I am struggling with I am struggling to vote, period, in a national election where we have a president now who's currently in office who, when he first ran, said he would run one term. I know there were a lot of people who were inspired by that, thinking that one day Kamala Harris could be, in fact, the first real choice for the Democratic Party as a female president. We now see two individuals that are pretty much going to be the nominees that are uninspiring, that are much of more the same. What do you say to someone like myself, who is a black man, who sees state representatives and state senator candidates being overlooked, who sees our party positioning unions and other things to support and to empower the candidates that they choose, and then they want to come back and ask for our vote? What would you say to someone like myself as it relates to getting them to vote for the whole ticket and not just for those things that impact them most?
Right. It wouldn't be just one statement or one phrase to be able to inspire a generation of new voters or voters that's going to be able to go to the polls and cast a vote using the greatest American right that you have. But what we have to do is rediscover our history and what our ancestors fought for. Now, if you look at the year 1870, 7 years after the emancipation of black people in this country, we had more people in Congress and in the Senate than we currently do in 2024. Then you had to fight against poll taxes, literacy tax, Jim Crow laws to be able to divide black people from the vote. It was an aggression of America to push people away from it. Then we had to move through the 1960s and the Civil Rights Act, for us to be able to reestablish the voting blocks. And now the psychology of America has pushed people away from the ballot box, much like the question that you posed. What would motivate, or what could we do to engage them? We have to discover and rediscover our history and what has happened over the course of the last 2 centuries as it relates to voting and our voting power, and what we can do to establish and continue to move this country forward. But definitely we have to understand and respect our power. From the local level, to the county level, to the state level, to the federal level, we have some input, and we have to do educational programs to be able to help people understand what it is. You can ask your listeners, what does the Board of Regents do? It's going to be on your ballot, or the state Supreme Court, or the state appeals court. How do these play a part, especially in the nonpartisan portions of your ballot? When you have lightly engaged people, because you don't have in our secondary education system, in the public system, where you don't have civics classes or social studies that teach you how to engage at the ballots, or you have these ballot initiative questions that's written in 45 words, and then maybe the comprehension, we don't quite understand it, and so we kind of shy away from it. So as a community, as a group, we have to work to help educate everyone about the importance of the vote, how to be able to participate in it, and not just having somebody from wherever they may be, from a pulpit or a union cheat card, to tell you what to go do. For everybody to strive for what's going to make their family stronger, to be able to have a united agenda, to be able to move our families forward. My family and your family is very important, and we should be able to focus in on saying that we are as important as everybody in this country, and we need to cast a vote to be able to increase the quality of life for our families.
Wow, that is a powerful statement. You said a lot in what you just said. Now I'm going to ask you a question, which is quite controversial. If you like to take a pass on this question, Mary Neely, I certainly will allow you to do so. When I look at our community and I look at what it is that we have represented and what we've done, and I look at the movement and the strides of the organizations that were so important. In my opening, I talked about SNCC, I talked about SCLC, all of the things that were responsible for the freedoms that we've had. You've noted a statistic about the representation in Congress as it related to Black people. Has organizations that have been a part of our civil rights history, organizations like the NAACP and other organizations of its kind, have they lost their steam, or where are they placed now as we look forward to this new, young, emerging Black population?
Well, and Mike, I can speak more to my area and the Flint area. I can't really speak to other areas. I think you have a pretty strong NAACP chapter there. I definitely know the president of your chapter there, and I think they're engaged and trying to engage more every day. But when we talk about resources and the lack of resources to be able to continue to push for urban leagues, urban leagues have been falling off the face of communities like Flint and maybe Saginaw. But there's a great need to that, right? In the city of Flint, I have 290 churches that fills in the infrastructure of our city. And in Saginaw, I would think that you would have not as many, but somewhat similar to that. But we have to be able to figure out ways to be able to support organizations where they are, and those organizations have to connect. And so it's one and the same. Those organizations are built from community members. And so we have to have strong, engaged community members, much like yourself, the next generation, to be able to fill in. What's happening for those organizations, they had no bench. It's a sports analogy that, you may have a great starting five, but if you have no bench, you have less likelihood of winning a game. We have to build our benches stronger, and we have to do so through education and engagement. And so that's why I appreciate you and the radio station there in Saginaw speaking to these every week, having these conversations with your community to be able to up and engage them, to be able to say, where do we plug in? How do we plug in? So everybody go join the Saginaw NAACP. Says we have ideas about how we want to do things and how we want to move things. Develop your urban league, develop the other alliances for these things to be moving in your communities. And so that's how we need to plug in, but definitely we need those individuals with strong foresight, a strong will to be able to see something better in their community than they see currently now.
I certainly appreciate that, and I hope that our listeners take that to task. I often have been a critic of the NAACP, and a good friend said, Kareem, change happens from the inside out. So if you don't like what you see and you're not involved, then that tells you what is missing from the agenda. You are. I want to thank you, Mayor Neely, for your time. You're giving us your voice, and I thank you for speaking truth to power in that op-ed that you shared in the Michigan Chronicle. I am for the business. Anybody who's willing to stand up and use their voice to make sure that we are not overlooked as a people. Thank you. Strength and power and wealth to you as you continue to make great things happen. Thank you for tuning in and being a part of our show today.
Thank you, and God bless.
And to the rest of you that are out there, I want to say thank you as usual for continually tuning into Straight Talk, making it your number one show in our target demographic. Also, I would like to share some news that came in this way. My other show, United Shades of Gray, Conversations of Race in America on WSGW, we found out on Friday, is targeted, and it has now become a finalist, one of two shows, as the best show in a mid-market for a individual or a group. So I want to thank you all for continuing to listen. Thank those powers that be. Thank Yvonne Daniels for allowing me this platform when I came to her some years ago. It's crazy that this has been since 2018, 6 years later. We're still going strong. As always, take care of yourselves and each other. Grace and peace.
You've been listening to Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen on KISS 107.1. The views and opinions expressed on Straight Talk with Kareem Bowen